If you were an avid fan of NASCAR growing up like I was, there was a good chance you're probably pretty nostalgic for the old EA games. When I go back and play NASCAR Thunder 2003 or 2005 Chase for the Cup, I'm flooded with childhood memories of sitting on the family room floor, terrorizing the AI at Daytona, and claiming the top spot at my favorite tracks. The old EA games just have this charm about them that can't be recaptured in modern titles. The music, the graphics. It was also incredibly early 2000s-esque, and I love it. My favorite thing the old EA games had to offer was a plethora of fantasy tracks. Fictional locations crafted by Electronic Arts for us to tear up the asphalt on. Most of these tracks are exactly what the name implies, fantasy. But a few of them aren't as fictional as you might think. Several of these tracks are actually recreations of real-life racetracks that either still exist or did at one point. So let's take a trip down memory lane and explore these tracks once more while discovering what inspired their inclusion in NASCAR 2005 Chase for the Cup. We're going to start by taking a look at my personal favorite fantasy course, Old Spice Speedway. When I emulated NASCAR 2005 for the first time on my PC, the first thing I did was put in a cheat code to unlock this track. As I began to make laps, I was transported back to my childhood. I could envision myself just sitting there in front of our old CRT TV in the living room just as it was in 2005. One of the biggest reasons I love this track so much is just how beautiful the scenery surrounding it is. There was a sense of mystery as to its location. I always liked to imagine that the track was built at the top of a mountain in some far-off country, but I didn't know exactly where. As adults, we all know that Old Spice Speedway is really just a bunch of pixels, but as a kid, it felt real, and the mystery of just where this track was supposed to be sparked my childhood wonder. That's a feeling that's hard to describe and even harder to recapture in adulthood. While researching for this video, I finally put the mystery to rest by doing what childhood me was apparently too dumb to do. I loaded into the track in every series multiple times to listen to the randomly chosen pre-race broadcasts, hoping they might include some tidbits of information or in-game lore about the track. After nearly 20 attempts, one of them finally stated the track's canon location.
EA Sports welcomes you to Sturgeon Bay, Wisconsin for today's NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series event. It's road course racing at its finest as these drivers prepare to take on this brand new gem of a road course. Truck Series veterans as well as some developing young prospects will take part in this one as we're set to get this event underway. Green flag action from America's Dairyland is next.
Sturgeon, Wisconsin. Yeah, kind of underwhelming. I liked my theory better. But enough of my nostalgia-filled ramblings. Let's get down to the details. Old Spice had a heavy presence as a sponsor in 2005, along with Dodge and Mr. Clean, so having a track not only named for it, but also plastered in its advertisements, was only natural. The circuit continued to appear in every EA game after its initial debut, until they sold the rights in 2010 to Eutechnyx. It was one of only a few fantasy tracks to never be renamed through all of the games in which it appeared, though it did experience a small change in 2007 when a few of the billboards along the sidelines got updated to advertise the then newly released movie, Talladega Nights: The Ballad of Ricky Bobby. For a road course, it's fairly short in length at only 1.5 miles. The layout, as a result, is fairly simple. After the start-finish line, you cross the iconic bridge, before navigating a fast left-right complex that leads into a heavily banked hairpin. Making your way down the winding backstretch, you'll pass the pit road entry point and dive into another hairpin similar to the first, and once you've done that, you're back at the start-finish line. Some quick in-game trivia for you. Fact number 1. Old Spice is one of only 2 tracks in NASCAR gaming history to feature an enclosed pit lane, the other being Dodge Raceway Stadium, but we'll get to that. Fact number 2, you can compete in all 4 official NASCAR sanctioned series at this track, something that can't be said for many of the other fantasy tracks. So, what could have possibly been the inspiration for such a fast-paced, breakneck road course like this? None other than Riverside Speedway in California. Comparing the track maps side by side, you can definitely see the similarities. 2 hairpins at either end of the track, a winding straightaway, and a fast left-right complex. An interesting thing to note is that Riverside was actually ran in the opposite direction of Old Spice. So if you really want the authentic Riverside experience, turn your ass around at the start of the race and force the AI to do the same. If you've ever heard of this track, it's likely because you've seen the famous clip of Dale Earnhardt Sr. sailing his Chevrolet through the infield grass, cutting the circuit and passing Jeff Bodine in the process. NASCAR would hold races at Riverside from 1958 until 1988, exactly a 30-year streak. For a short stint, the venue even hosted the season opener. Riverside closed down in 1989, and a shopping mall was erected on the property in its place. In 2003, what remained of the racing surface was torn up, and strangely, plans were made to create a new track with a near-identical layout not far away. These plans were abandoned in 2009, however. So, to summarize, Old Spice is heavily based on a now-defunct track called Riverside, with the only major difference being that it's ran backwards. Now, on to track number 2, Dodge Raceway Stadium. Located in Maitland, Florida, and built on the perimeter of a football field, this quarter-mile oval may well hold the honor of being the shortest track in any NASCAR game. It's chaotic, it's tiring, but in the end, it's an absolute blast to race on. You can come here and compete in the Modified, Truck, and Busch series. Like Old Spice, Dodge Raceway Stadium would continue to make appearances in every EA game after its introduction. The time you spend racing here will almost all be spent sawing on your joystick as you repeatedly go from the exit of one turn into the entry of the next. The straightaways are so short that you have absolutely no time to take a break. One single lapse in concentration, and you'll either end up clipping the apron and spinning out, or sliding up into the wall. Making mistakes like that here is costly because you're almost always in traffic. Traffic that is not keen on letting you recover. Before we talk about the real-life counterpart to this short track, let's cover some in-game trivia. Fact number 1. As previously mentioned, this is the second and final track to ever include an enclosed pit lane, which wraps around the entire facility. You'll exit the pits just behind where you'd entered. Fact number 2. It's almost guaranteed that the AI will cause a caution once green flag pit stops have commenced. This is because the track is too small for the AI to respond to the slower cars trying to enter the pits. This occurs occasionally on other tracks such as Bristol, Red Bull, and Levi Strauss, but none of these tracks have the near 100% chance for this to happen like Dodge Raceway does. Fact number 3. Dodge Raceway is the only place you'll ever find a football field in any NASCAR game. Period. But you probably knew that. Fact number 4. It is highly implied that Dodge Raceway Stadium is the replacement of another fantasy track, Tiburon Super Speedway. Both tracks canonically existed in the same geographical area, and Tiburon made its last in-game appearance just before Dodge Raceway made its first. EA Tiburon, the studio responsible for the NASCAR titles, was based out of Maitland. Thus, they swapped out one representative track for another. Fact number 5. In the Truck and Busch series, it's actually faster to downshift into third while cornering, and depending on what line you run, you can actually win a race without ever having touched fourth gear. Alright, you've waited long enough, and you probably want to know where you can go see the insane action of Dodge Raceway Stadium in real life. Well, for that, you'd have to make a trip out to Winston-Salem, North Carolina. That's right, the real-life Dodge Raceway is none other than the Madhouse, Bowman Gray Stadium. Known for its unique attribute of being built inside a football stadium, local club races are held here seasonally. NASCAR has a long and mildly controversial history with this place, having raced there in the Cup Series from 1958 until 1971. After the Cup Series abandoned Bowman Gray, the K&N Series would step up and make NASCAR's long-awaited return to the Madhouse in 2011, racing for the next 4 years thereafter until 2015. In the present day, the only sanctioned NASCAR series that will run there is the Southern Whelen Modified Division. Races here are known for being more akin to a demo derby than an actual race. The absurdly small track size and often amateur drivers make for on-track action like you would never see anywhere else. Earlier this year, a driver was banned from the facility after intentionally going backwards to ram another driver that had pissed him off. And the crazy thing is, that's not the first time it's happened, and it likely won't be the last. Due to the wreck-filled racing, the track has built up a stigma. There's an idea that it's a racetrack for people who would rather watch car crashes than an actual race, and that those who do race there are destined to remain local drivers forever. Whether or not that's true, I won't comment, but it's partially because of that stigma that we likely won't ever see a Cup Series return. The other factor hindering a Cup Series return is the lack of room for the teams to work. There isn't enough pit space, and there is no on-site garages. Now, onto the third fantasy track, Red Bull Raceway. Nestled in the rolling fields of Farmington, Indiana, lies a half-mile, high-banked oval reminiscent of Bristol itself. Racing here feels like you're in the middle of nowhere, and as far as you can see, you are. Along the backstretch, you'll find a railway with some lone rail cars lined up on it. And at the center of either turn, you'll find a barn. These two barns always intrigued me as a kid because I wanted to know what was in them. There's just something about the atmosphere here that, like Old Spice Speedway, fascinated me as a kid. I wanted to know more about this place, and I remember trying and failing to wreck bad enough to launch over the barrier so that I could explore outside the track. I came close a few times, but alas, the invisible barrier foiled me every time. Anyway, what is the racing here actually like? Well, like most short tracks in this game, it's hectic. You've got to stay focused the whole time, and make sure to apex the turns as best you can. Once the tires begin to wear, you'll likely find yourself drifting through the corners like Takumi Fujiwara if you're not cautious. Preserving your equipment is key here, especially in longer races. The AI are fast, and they rarely make mistakes. Now, some trivia. Fact number 1. The barn models and the train models you see here aren't used anywhere else in the game. Reusing assets was very common at the time this game was developed, so this track really stands out because of this. Fact number 2. This is the first oval track in which you compete at in the game's career mode. Fact number 3. Red Ball was later renamed to Orchard Speedway in NASCAR 2009, a name more fitting of the track's surroundings. This was also the track's final appearance in a NASCAR game. Okay, now, I ask you, what real-life track do you think Red Ball was based on? If you said Bristol, well, you'd be wrong. Red Ball Raceway, in actuality, is based on Mansfield Speedway in Mansfield, Ohio. Though some believe it was designed to emulate Southern Raceway Park, that theory is largely unfounded. From 2004 to 2008, the Craftsman Truck Series competed at Mansfield. Conversely, Southern Motorsports Park has never hosted a sanctioned NASCAR event, thus is unlikely to have crossed the developer's mind when creating these fantasy courses. Red Ball's slot on the truck schedule in-game also parallels the exact date that they raced at Mansfield in real life during the 2005 season. So we can safely assume that Red Ball Raceway was the developer's way of getting Mansfield in their game without actually having to deal with any licensing. Mansfield closed down in 2010 and was bought at auction for $800,000 in 2013, after the property had been seized due to unpaid taxes. In 2017, the asphalt surface was ripped out and replaced with dirt. Today, Lucas Oil Dirt Late models are the track's biggest draw, and as a business, the track is financially stable. Now moving on to the final fantasy track with a real-life inspiration, Levi Strauss Signature Speedway. Levi Strauss Signature Speedway is set in Clearfield, Pennsylvania, and it offers up one of the most challenging short track experiences in the game. The track is a half-mile triangle, with each turn different from the last. There's tight turns, wide turns, banked turns, flat turns, a little bit of everything. Getting your car or truck to handle here is tough because when you set the car up to run one corner well, you might just be making it worse in another. And to add to the difficulty, the AI are at their peak here. They won't mess around. You might be leading the race, but if you make one mistake, they will freight train you until you are back of the pack. And making up those positions is definitely not a Sunday drive. Personally, I always dread seeing this place come up on my schedule in a season. I was never able to get the hang of it, so my points almost always suffer. In-game trivia time. Fact number 1. This track replaces Pocono for the Craftsman Truck Series in this game, despite being a much smaller substitute. The reason for this replacement was that EA failed negotiations with the owners of Pocono during the 2003 season, meaning the track was absent in NASCAR 2005. Fact number 2. The scenery surrounding this track is incredibly close to the real-life Clearfield, PA. Many tracks have a backdrop that feel like they could be set anywhere, but if you look at pictures side by side, it's incredible how close the developers got the game to look to real life. And that's really all I've got in terms of trivia. Nothing too crazy to note about Levi Strauss. If you want to see Levi Strauss Signature Speedway in real life, look no further than Concord Speedway. Located in real-life Midland, North Carolina, the layout of this track is almost identical to what is seen with Levi Strauss. In fact, it's so similar that when I first raced at Concord on iRacing in the Modified series, I felt right at home because I instantly recognized it as that track from NASCAR 2005. The facility's history with NASCAR is largely confusing, as 3 tracks in total have held the title of Concord Speedway. a dirt half-mile oval, an asphalt half-mile oval, and finally, the triangle that we all know and love. NASCAR did host 12 Cup Series races between the two iterations of the dirt oval between 1956 and 1964, as well as one convertible series race in 1957. Later, the Whelen Modified Series and the ARCA Series would compete on the triangle track in which Levi Strauss was based on. Just this year, in 2019, the track was announced to be up for sale after losing several big-name events. The buyer is unknown, and we aren't sure if racing will ever return to the site. And so there you have it. Some fantasy tracks from NASCAR 2005 and the real-life tracks that inspired them. There's just something about these EA games, like I said, that really fascinated me as a kid, and when I discovered a few years back that a lot of these fantasy tracks had real-life counterparts, I was kind of blown away, and looking at pictures and videos of them, it was kind of like I was watching the game that I had grew up playing in real life. So, I hope you enjoyed. I hope to do more content like this in the future. I've put a lot of time and work into this video, a lot of editing, recording, writing the script, but I've had a blast doing it, and it's definitely been an enjoyable process. So, thank you guys for watching, and we will catch you in the next one.